After winning 11 games, winning a New Year's Six bowl game, and beating a Michigan team that went to the college football playoff, there was a lot of expectations for Michigan State entering 2022. But I think it's safe to say they didn't live up to a lot of those expectations. It's time to review the 2022 Michigan State Spartans. But before we do, it's a great time to subscribe to the channel. Big Ten content every single day. Always mash the like button to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses. Look, when we take a look at this Michigan State team and we look back at the Spartans in 2022, I think one thing and a phrase that kind of pops into my mind is this was a season of turmoil. And it was a season of turmoil in a variety of ways, whether it was blowout losses at the beginning of the season that opened a lot of eyes, whether it was injuries, whether it was a tunnel fight. There was just a lot of things week after week after week that Michigan State had to continually overcome. Now, coming into the season, okay, you look back at 2021, Mel Tucker may have gotten, maybe to date, one of the best transfer portal acquisitions that we've seen in the country, and that was Kenneth Walker transferring over from Wake Forest and transferring into Michigan State. And he had a Heisman caliber season, and he carried the Michigan State offense on his shoulders. He was such a big part to that football team. So the question entering this season was, how do you replace a guy like Kenneth Walker? How do you replace that type of production? Well, Mel Tucker went back to the transfer portal and elected to kind of grab a couple of guys, and it looked like a couple of guys is what it was going to take to equal the production of Kenneth Walker, right? Jalen Berger from Wisconsin. You go out and you get Jarek Broussard from Colorado, and where I was sitting and how I'm looking at it, I'm seeing, well, not one guy is going to rush for 1,500 yards. Not one guy is going to rush for 1,600 yards and be a Heisman caliber type of back that Kenneth Walker was. I thought this was going to be a really good 1-2 punch in the backfield for the Michigan State Spartans, right? Jalen Berger, a bigger guy, maybe more of a physical right at you kind of runner. And then you take a look at the more shifty type of Jarek Broussard. Look, he put up similar numbers at Colorado that Kenneth Walker did at Wake Forest. So it looked like things were going to go well, and it looked like the transfer portal was again going to emerge and produce some really good things for Michigan State. It just didn't turn out that way. It just didn't mesh. Later on in the season, this running game got a little bit better, but they just didn't have the explosiveness and the big playability that Kenneth Walker did. Neither of them. Whether it was Broussard, you throw in Elijah Collins as well, that running game as well. They never really had the explosiveness and the playmaking ability that Kenneth Walker has, where any moment they touch the football, that they can take it to the house and create points and put points up on the scoreboard. Look, the thing that opened my eyes about Michigan State football this season was those two early losses. Like the loss to Washington. Look, we didn't know just how good of a team Washington was going to be at that point in the season, just how good and more rejuvenated that Michael Penix was going to be at quarterback for the Huskies. And then Minnesota, right? And that big-time blowout loss to the Gophers, where the Gophers just punched them in the mouth, possession after possession after possession. Those two games really opened up my eyes. And even those two teams ended up being pretty solid football teams. It really opened up my eyes thinking, oh, Michigan State's got some issues, right? You had those two losses. And then you pile up some injuries, especially on defense. There was a time, I think, half their defense, maybe even more than half of their defense was injured. There was a rare week where really all these guys, you factor in injuries and the suspensions after the Michigan game later on in the season, there was rarely a week where you had 11 guys on offense, your top 11 guys on offense, and your top 11 guys on defense. And that really halted Michigan State's progression, right? Throwing in a lot of young guys, really testing the depth of this team. When you got to go out there and you got to play tough Big Ten competition every week, yeah, it's probably not going to go well. Okay, and then you got the tunnel fight, right? It gave a bad rap. It gave a bad look to Michigan State after that. Now, they did respond, I think, in a positive way following that, but it was just another thing. It seems like when Michigan State seemed to be putting something good together, right? As soon as you go and you win an overtime win against Wisconsin, as soon as you take one step forward, you take two steps back. That's the way it seemed like Michigan State. Like after the Michigan game, after the tunnel fight, oh, you go and you beat Illinois, and maybe you put some wins together, and then you lose to Indiana to cost yourself, or what ended up costing them, bowl eligibility. It always seemed like they were chasing something. It always seems like something was bringing them back, pulling them back, and as soon as they took a step forward, that those things kept on pulling them backwards this season. Look, if there's a silver lining for Sparty fans, I honestly believe this type of season is as bad as it's going to get for Michigan State. Like I'll probably say the same thing about Wisconsin in their review. A 5-7 season with a tunnel fight that no one really can predict at the beginning of the season that led to a bunch of suspensions to some good players and injuries and everything. Like, this is as bad as it's going to get. Mel Tucker is on the verge of putting together back-to-back top 30 recruiting classes nationally, potentially top 5 Big Ten classes back-to-back as well. This guy's doing it in the recruiting. We know what he can do in the transfer portal. Okay? We know what he can do in terms of bringing in talent. The big thing is developing that talent, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Look, Mel Tucker's a defensive guy. And for this defense really not to make a ton of progressions in 2022 from what they had in 2021 is a little bit iffy right now. And that's something that they've really got to address. Right? This is a team that has to get tougher more consistently. Like, I look at that Illinois game. Illinois, they played tough in key spots against a really tough team in the Fighting Illini. But when I look at this Michigan State team, look, even in 2021, I see the playmaking ability, and that was a bad defense in 2021 despite what they did on offense. This is a team that's got a Big Ten, their program. They've got to get that toughness. They've got to get that physicality somehow, because right now, the way this team is structured, I just don't know if they have enough playmakers going forward in the future to really make a big difference where they can, forego, so to speak, that physical and physical mentality and toughness part of their game. So that's going to be something I think to keep an eye on in the future. Look, and I will say this about 2022. They got better. Now, despite what we saw in that Indiana game where they dominated the statistics, but somehow gave that game away to the Hoosiers, this was a team that got better. Like, especially after that Michigan game when this team could have totally folded up shop and maybe not won a game the rest of the year. Mel Tucker kept these guys focused. Once again, outside of that Indiana game, kept these guys focused. They won some football games. They built some confidence kind of late in the season. Peyton Thorne seemed to throw the football a little bit better. Jalen Berger got going in the running game, just a little bit more. And Jalen Berger is a guy to keep an eye on in 2023. Look, he's almost 700 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns. And if they can really get him going a little bit more, I think he could be an 1,000-yard rusher next season. The big question is, where does Michigan State go at the quarterback position? Where do they go in the passing game? I think that's something to keep an eye on in the future. Look, you can only go up from here, I believe, with what you have at Michigan State. That's got to be the option, right? There's no going down. I don't think you can really take many steps down. The way Mel Tucker is recruiting, the way he continuously attacks the transfer portal, I don't think this team takes steps down. But the Big Ten is going to get a lot tougher. Right, in 2023, especially in 2024 with USC and UCLA. How does Michigan State factor into that? Because if you look forward at 2023, that's a lot of time what these season reviews are. When you look forward at Penn State and what they have coming back, right, Alar and those 2 great young running backs and just what James Franklin is bringing in recruiting. You look at Ohio State and Michigan, it's going to be tough in the Big Ten East. But it remains to be seen if Sparty will spring forward and jump back up, or are they going to hang around that bowl eligibility mark? I want to hear your thoughts on the 2022 Michigan State Spartans. What did you think? Were you disappointed by their results, or do you think there is a bright future ahead for Michigan State? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. I'm Big Ten Ted, and we will see you in the next one.